and welcome to the Vigilate Dialogues. I'm your host, Shaina Smith, welcoming you to the National Boardroom. This evening with me, I have Dr. Michael Turnbull from the Wellness Center, and we'll be talking about socio-economic development of our country and the impacts on our well-beings as individuals as well as a society. Dr. Turnbull, welcome back.
So I'm so happy to be here, to be able to have a discussion with you and your lovely audience on tonight, so we could make sure that we could continue to remember the importance of not only mental health but behavioral health as we continue to move forward in social economic development. But we also have to make sure as we develop economically that we remember the social fabric and the mental fabric and the overall well-being of our people and how this impacts us.
Yes, very important. So for those who may not have seen the last episode when you were here, just give a background in terms of who you are, what the Wellness Center and Behavioral Health Clinic is all about, and we'll jump right in.
The Wellness Center is an outpatient behavioral health clinic that specializes in children and family, providing individual and family therapy, as well as psychological testing amounts of few. We are destined to help people live well. We specialize in children and families because sometimes those are the most vulnerable parts of our society. So we're here located. We have fully licensed and credentialed professionals who are able to help us live well. We accept national health insurance and other forms of payment, but we are here really to make a difference, to help people live better. But you know, that's basically what we do on a daily basis. But our main goal is to just be an integral part of society, to make sure when people come to our place that they have a place of hope, that they feel like they can go on and they feel empowered.
And that's a very important point that you made in regards to, you know, we always hear a lot of talk about the economic development of our country, but the impacts on us as social beings now in terms of, especially towards our mental health, because we focus a lot on physical health and take for granted, I think, sometimes the impact or the influence that mental health has on our overall life, and especially on our children.
Yeah.
You know.
And I mean, that's very paramount for this past week. For the last 2 weeks, for example, we've had suicide attempts that have been in the news from a young man in high school. We've had a prisoner successfully suicide. So this shouldn't be what we make us realize that there's a problem with significant depression amongst our people. And right now, it's sad that it took to these kind of extreme measures that someone had to lose their life and really significant attempt for us to shine a broader light on this. But parents, communities, friends need to be aware of how to help, the signs and symptoms, and really make sure that we don't gloss over such an issue, because depression in its extremity ends with death. People think that that's a way out. So it's tragic, and for those families that are dealing with these losses and for these attempts, my heart goes out to them to make sure that they're able to get through this tough time. And there are people who at different times go through depressive episodes. All of us have times where we feel like this. We are feeling sad, we feel withdrawn, we feel guilty, we don't feel like going to work, we feel just overall just down on life, pessimistic, don't have a hope for the future. That goes and comes. However, if you've been struggling for more than 2 weeks, you're crying more times than not, you're sad more times than not, you're feeling guilty, have low energy, not been eating properly or overeating, or having thoughts of hurting yourself, and now have a plan, we need to really get you in a position to get help. Especially for young people, depression looks a little bit different. They will end up showing signs and dropping their grades, their behavior will change, and some, especially for our young men, they may become angry. It might not look like an adult who's just isolated, but they still are.
They get aggressive.
They could meet criteria for depression, so we need to pay attention to that. And all we need to do is let them and direct them to people who can help. There are a number of people in our community who are able to help and offer solutions. And that's what we need to do, because you might be like, where young people don't have stress.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they
they-
don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah,
That's what we
they-
often say.
But that's not the case, because there's significant traumas that they go through
Okay.
as a young age, from parents being divorced, to family members dying, to friends dying, to traumatic changes in their health and well-being. Young people are now being diagnosed with cancer, terminal illnesses, and it's very hard for them to make sense of it. So don't disregard their stress.
Yeah.
Although it might not be adult stress, it affects them all the same. And
Okay.
especially a lot of our young people don't have the resources, the social skills, the coping mechanisms to be able to deal with these traumas. So we need to make sure we support them, not judge them, but support them.
Okay. So in terms of, you've opened up the practice just over a year now?
Yeah, a year will be in June. Yes.
A year will be in June. So what are, you mentioned about suicide attempts and depression. What other issues are you seeing in terms of, that our young people are dealing with that we need to pay closer attention to?
There's a lot of young people have a difficult time managing anger and emotions and using adaptive methods to cope. So a lot of them turn to drug use, marijuana use to cope with their stress and anger. So we've seen a lot of young people that are adjusting to a lot of psychological stress and are using maladaptive ways to cope. Basically, they're not handling the stress
They're not
in a
dealing
well
with
way.
it. Yeah.
And that's happening so much that it looks like a lot of our young people meet criteria for oppositional defiant disorder, where they're lying, stealing, sneaking out at night, engaging in illicit sexual behavior. And those could be signs. That's a behavior, and that is problematic. However, oftentimes there is something behind that that's fueling that and maintaining that. That's something that we're seeing. But a lot of the young people that I see oftentimes are reacting to things that are happening in the environment that they can't control, with parents, loved ones, and they feel vulnerable, and they take a lot of that stuff in, and we need to allow them to be able to cope with it. And also, there are a lot of children that are struggling academically, educationally, and because of their academic and cognitive struggles, their now behavior is acting out in the classroom setting. Because there's a simple method that we use sometimes, that a child's behavior could be described in two ways: whether they want to obtain something or escape from something. If you're not good in school, you're going to try to escape that environment. So that means you're going to act up, you're going to talk back, you're going to be rude, because then what? You're going to get suspended, sent from the class. So you then get to avoid a classroom or environment that you're not good at. So they're now using that maladaptive behavior to get a reward.
Yeah.
Or they want attention, because they're not getting attention in a home environment. So they do things to get negative attention. And that, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, because it's like saying you get kicked out of school and then you have more stress now because, your parents are upset at you, everybody's disappointed, and that creates a cycle, as it were, that they can't seem to escape.
Yeah, but you were able to solve the problem. Yeah, you're not in school anymore. You're not going to be made fun of because you're having problems reading or you don't know the math problem. It's very difficult. And the good thing is there are a number of people here in our country who are willing to do the work. There are a number of programs that are starting who collectively, if we continue to develop a plan strategically to work together, we could get our hands around this, but it will take everyone willing, and we have to plan and work together and synthesize these things. So we're not trying to corral this beast by ourselves, but we're all putting our arms around it and using our different skill sets.
So in terms of the wider society, what are some of the specifics now that we need to look at, whether it's I like to use the institutional model, whether it's family, it's school, it's church, it's the government, because like you're saying, it has to be an integrated approach.
Yeah, I think that the simple question that we could ask for a litmus test, whether we're doing a project or a physical structure or institution, is how is this going to help promote and maintain the health and well-being of our people and our children? That is a socioeconomic test. You have to ask how this is going to impact. So in every institution, whenever you make a decision, how is this going to impact our people? How is it going to impact their overall well-being and mental health? And that needs to start that all of us are guiding our principles that yes, these things are important, but our people are more important. That we need to make sure that whatever we do, from our families, the decisions that we make for ourselves as individuals, on the church level, on the governmental level, in the school level, how is this going to affect the health and well-being of our children in our future? That's the first question we need to ask. And then strategically planning and integrating and where we want to be 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. How do we want our overall structure of our social fabric to be able to look like? What programs are we going to start? How are we going to educate our children about good touch, bad touch? How are we going to educate our children about how to handle divorce and stress and anger, signs of suicide, and better ways to cope with stress than self-harming behaviors like cutting? It's all evident in our community, and we need to continue to educate our parents, but also educate our children.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot of money. It just takes the willingness and a strategic plan to implement such.
Yeah, and I definitely see where you're highlighting for us as far as the priorities that we need to place, because even things like, say for example with the school, as you were speaking, I was thinking about, let's say for example, overcrowding at a school. The biggest example most people like to use is probably the high school, and knowing that we need to change some things there in terms of whether it's more classrooms, more teachers, whatever the case is, and starting to realize the effect or the stress that comes with children being in an overcrowded school. So whether it's primary school or the high school, it has an impact on them. They're there 5 days a week for 8 hours, and those are things that are kind of like building up on them. And as parents, we're just dropping them off and picking them up and not paying attention now to
it needs to be integrated, that we need to follow. And I'm always the proponent that we could always sit here, and all of us in our community, and point out what needs to be done. Or curse the darkness. I'm more so of the point now that we realize that these things are happening. They've not been in existence for 2 years, 3 years. They've been in existence for a very long time. What are we trying to do now to implement and integrate and change these problems? Where are we putting our funding to show that these are our priorities? And these things continue to happen, but we need to continue to make strategic change, because if the high school is used as a symbol of what needs to be corrected, well, let's do it. Let's not just continue to talk about it, but it will take an entire shift in our perspective and seeing how that saving this generation will be significantly important to the overall health and well-being. A smaller classroom will not solve everything, but it will solve a number of things.
Yeah, definitely. So before we take a break, what are some of the tips now? We talked about our young people, until we get those programs in place to make sure that they have the skill sets that they need in terms of coping with life. Because, I often tell my my godson, we're not training you to be a child, we're training you to be an adult. So it's important that we teach them how to handle life before they get to that stage of saying, well, you're 18 now, go and fly. If we haven't trained them though and given them those skill sets, what are some of the tips, whether it's for the parents or for our young people?
Well, I would say parents, guardians, or people around. The first thing, if you see a child that's struggling or exhibiting any signs of behavioral changes, the first thing you need to do is make an environment where the child feels accepted. Yelling and getting angry and fussing at them is not going to help. All the child is going to do is shut down. So you need to make them feel as safe as possible. Also, you need to invite them to let them know that whenever, especially for teenagers, whenever they're ready to talk, that you will be there. Don't judge how they feel. I know you might be scared if a child says they want to hurt themselves, and you might feel overwhelmed, but at least you know what's going on. And then that's the time you could refer to help from the guidance counselors, psychologists, social workers, or people who are able to help to intervene and give that child the support, but also give you the support. And also be open to see what is causing this. Because yes, depression is a clinical disorder that could be determined by chemical imbalances in the body, but also it's also contributed by environmental stress. So we have to listen to our children. And so I'll tell parents, don't wait till something goes bad. Try to maintain as healthy and open relationship with your child as possible. Do fun things with your child. Spend time with your children, because at those moments you'll find out what's going on and what's bothering them. Don't wait till the extreme happens. And if for children, you might feel, as teenagers and young people, you might feel like nobody listens to you, nobody understands. There are people that want to listen to you. There are people that understand, but you just have to reach out. And if one person doesn't do it, just find someone else, because you're so important, and what you're going through, I understand it's difficult, but we don't want you to give up. And that goes for everyone. Don't give up. Just speak out. Ask for help. Reach out. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're tuned in to the Vigilate Dialogues. I'm your host, Shaina Smith, and with me this evening I have Dr. Michael Turnbull from the Wellness Center. And we've been talking about socio-economic development and the environment in which we find ourselves and the impact it has on our mental health and well-being. So we've touched on some of the current issues you've been seeing with our young people, and highlighting things in terms of the most recent incidents where we had suicide as well as suicide attempt, and even in terms of our wider society, the climate, the political climate in the country, how that affects us, and also about the priorities in terms of the whole debate around where money is allocated in the budget. Let's talk now a little bit about families. And again, our children they didn't just show up. They're part of a family unit, we would hope. But I know over the years, compared to when we grew up, 20 years ago, that the family structure has changed, the family environment has changed. Let's talk some about, those changes and, what are some of the things that we need to pay attention to?
Well, I mean, the family dynamic has changed. It's no longer just a mom and dad. They're single parents, mothers and fathers, their aunts, their guardians, foster parents that are raising kids. And our children are susceptible to so many things that they have to deal with. I want to remind people and us as members of society is that we have one of the most important jobs of being parents or being guardians, because we are responsible for helping shaping the minds of these children. So one, we need to protect our children. Just simple protection. We need to protect them from domestic violence. We need to protect them from physical violence. And we need to protect them from sexual abuse. The reasons might be obvious, but there are reasons beyond the obvious reasons. When children are exposed to that level of trauma, that level of misabuse, it ends up with them being adults who are struggling with depression, with anxiety, with post-traumatic stress disorder, who are abusing substances because of that, what has been done to them. And also parents who are contemplating divorce or who are going through separations or difficult times. I will want to say, try as best as you can, if you can, to work on your marriage. If you can't, try as best as you can to have your divorce and settlement be as amicable as possible. It's better for a kid to be in a healthy environment than an unhealthy environment. So if your marriage is unhealthy, it's better to have your kid not in that environment. But what we need to do is make sure that our children get the support, because divorce is very difficult for children. It's emblematic of parents dying, because that what they once knew is no longer. So we really need to make sure that we take these things seriously. And also for parents, it's difficult being a parent. You have to work, you're trying to take care of your home, you have all these responsibilities, you're taking care of school and children. It's so much pressure, and it's overwhelming, and it's difficult. So parents, I will say, take time out to take care of yourself as well. You're not a machine, you're a human being. So you need to find people that can support you, help you, give you breaks as well, so you could be as healthy as possible to raise this child, because most of the things that we do as parents are not taught, they're caught, meaning that you model what you want for your children. And you have to be the best self that you can be. That means re-examining yourself and making sure that you are healthy. That means you cope well. And ask for help if you need to. But it's a difficult job. So we really want to, support parents and let them know you might not be the best parent. You might not do everything well, but at least what you can do at a minimum, especially to our fathers in our community, especially at a minimum, is to be present.
Okay.
And don't allow your feelings for the mom to keep you away from your children, and vice versa. We should not allow our relationship strife to allow us to use our children as a pawn, because at the end of the day, who suffers significantly is our children, who are voiceless often and end up displaying behaviors because of adult reactions and adult beef. We can't do that. That's not fair.
Yeah.
So let's examine ourselves. And I often ask parents, who is getting hurt in this situation? It's often the children. And if you don't want to hurt them, if you're saying you're loving them, make sure you take steps that are shown, are emblematic and are symbolic of your love. Take action that shows that you love them.
Yeah. And that's important. And as you said that, what are your thoughts about the child maintenance bill that was recently brought to the House of Assembly?
Well, I know a lot of people have a different perspective on this. However, the bill is very necessary. And this shows where we are in the timbre of our community right now, is that we have to regulate visits, and we have to regulate equal access, and we have to regulate that children are not subjected to adult beef, basically.
Yeah.
So people will be like, well, why should we have to intervene? But we did. The government did. And the Social Development Department, who under the leadership of Ms. Malone Fred, deals with this very daily.
Every day.
So this is here to help. But even with laws, as you know, it will still take us as adults and parents to comply.
Yeah.
And hopefully what will be in place is that we don't need such or have to go to this point of legislation, that families can mediate visits among themselves and work together.
Yeah.
Because if you're interested in your child's well-being, you won't use your strife or your hate or your angst against your partner and use your child to dictate to get back at them.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you're hurting your children. They're going to be struggling in school. They're going to be lack of focus. They're going to be oppositional. They're not going to want to listen to you.
Yeah.
Because of this anger that's happening in the family dynamic.
Yeah. And when they become older, they become resentful. So then it's like the relationship between the child and the parent is never going to be, if it's not addressed, it becomes even worse as it gets older.
And if it's not addressed, what you end up happening is that you have children picking sides or have to choose sides between their parents. And that's a very difficult position to be in. So if we want to make sure that we are helping our families, it's just as best as possible, create the healthiest environment. Even if you're estranged in your relationship, create the healthiest environment between mothers and fathers. And if you're married, make sure you work on your marriage and make sure your environment continues to be healthy, that your children are not subjected to emotional, physical, or domestic violence as best as possible.
Very key, very key. Well, we'll take a commercial break here and get a word from our sponsors and be right back. Welcome back. You're tuned in to the Vigilate Dialogues. I am your host, Shaina Smith, and with me this evening I have Dr. Michael Turnbull from the Wellness Center. He is one of our child psychologists.
Yes.
Yes. And recently opened almost a year now in June, and he has been very busy. And I guess that's a good and a bad thing from the perspective of we have the resources now that we need in our community, but we definitely have issues like we were talking about in our first segment that need to be addressed. So I do look forward to more dialogue concerning, action plans and around the programs and initiatives that need to take place to maintain a quality of life. Because I think, it's funny when we hear people talk about, our forefathers survived poverty, but we're struggling with prosperity because it comes with a lot of different responsibilities is what I would say, and a lot of different environment as it were. So even for us now as adults, sometimes I think just reading the news or listening to the news can be very depressing.
Yeah.
And there's recent events that have happened, and I find our society has become very politicized in some regards, and there's a lot of bias and a lot of different things going on. And the most recent incident was, let's say, for example, with the governor's decision regarding funding for the police force, and how people are. It's created basically a dividing line.
Yeah.
In our society. So let's talk about how things like that affect us in terms of our mental health and well-being.
Well, I mean, I will say, as first, I'm a citizen and a member of this country. So as things happen, I always believe that we need to put our country first. That's why I do this job, because I'm invested in trying to make a small difference in the lives of the people that are affected. Now, when we think about the whole system that's set up as us still being a colony and people who are in different sides of the fence, this is not politically motivated or my sentiments. I think this is a above self. This is a country above self issue. When we think about what has happened and what the implications are for this, I understand that the governor may have had his points or views of why he had to take this action and use his reserve power in this way. It does send a message on one side that some people are saying that, well, it wasn't at the point where, the elected officials weren't doing their job, so he had to take control and make sure it happens. That's one side of the coin. And others are saying, well, at this point, we feel like we're being taken advantage of. It's not respect for our Constitution and our people. And then there's a divide. Where do we fall in all of this? Well, there are two sides of this. That you can see that this kind of stress is repugnant in our society. It's so present, it's palpitating, that we're now faced with decisions that this decision was placed to put $800,000 in the police force. Yeah. Before that, several years ago, $2 million was allocated to the police under a previous administration. My thing, personally, and I could be biased because of children, I would have loved to see that money go to schools. I would have loved to see that money go to children. So I'm not saying that this is not important, but how does that affect? Do we spend more money policing or spend more money educating to prevent the need for more policing? Do we see that we still are at a point that we feel that we need to be dictated and mandated by an outside country or entity, or we are going to put ourselves in a position that we could govern our own fate? And regardless of who is in power, we need to continue to make sure that we support the people that we are putting in our place, and we do not undergird their power. Now, I think the way it was done could have been a lot better. It could have been more talking from both sides.
As far as that effort to negotiate.
Yeah, to make sure that it wasn't done, because now it's set up us against them. And whenever you have that kind of divide, whenever you have that kind of strife that's present in the atmosphere, it creates an environment that makes it okay for that kind of animosity and adversity to be present. And when people feel like it's us against them, it creates a very hostile social environment that's not healthy, that's not contributing to health and well-being. So you might be like, well, decisions like this. Well, I'm not just, this decision is most recent, but there are other things that happen in our community that need to be and seen. How is this going to impact? And how we, as our elected officials and leaders and people who have been placed in power, how are your decisions affecting what is happening in our community? So, as this goes along, there are a number of things that could be said. I'm not a politician, I'm a citizen. And where I looked at this is, if reserve power could be used, can it be used more for education than policing? Can it be used more for what we're going to do to maintain and make sure that our young people don't need to be policed? So when I look at that, I was like, where is our priorities? Is our priorities just in policing and prisons? Because every time that England has sent money to this country, the 2 times now that I've remembered, I could be wrong, was for the prison and now for police.
Yeah.
I don't know. What is that message sending to us as a people? What are we dictating? I'm not sure.
And that's so key that you highlighted that, because we really have to be more proactive in regards to not reacting to the problem, but actually solving the problem actually before it happens.
Okay.
You know, so it's definitely an important thing, I think, in terms of the issue, and having that different perspective on it. Because I know, you know, again, people are seeing this decision as being, you know, this kind of, well, it's 8 days news, and then after a while it passed, and there'll be some back and forth between the leadership in terms of, you know, someone says something and then someone will respond back, and then it's going back and forth. But even on our children now, how are they perceiving this?
Well, I think, you know, I think what it does is sets up an environment that the young people, especially like our leadership and our government, they don't care about us. They're just out there doing their thing, fighting over this and fighting over that. And what is it that's going to, how does this direct to us? How does this affect us on a daily basis? So what they get is disenchanted about the whole thing, because all they see or what they may possibly perceive is fighting. So that then gives them the idea that this level of pessimism, that is nothing to look forward to. This ain't about us. They're doing this for themselves and for their own gain, and it's not about us. So what we really need to make sure is that we continue to reconnect and allow them to see, because our young people are, us included, are what we need to preserve this country for. And it's not just about buildings and structure and budget. It's about integrating and putting your hand to the soil and mentoring programs. So if this $800,000 is going to go towards community policing and starting community programs like police athletic leagues, where they bring kids and start community basketball leagues and stuff like that, where police are not seen as adversaries but are part of the community, I'm all for it. But if it's just to go and buy more equipment to lock people up, to police and buy guns and more trucks to put people in, I'm not about that, because you're just adding to the problem. You're not trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, and that's so key. Well, Dr. Turnbull, we're out of time, but it's been great having you and hearing from you in terms of your insights, in terms of how we increase or maintain our quality of life, because that's one of always the biggest things for me, in terms of having the conversations around how we maintain quality of life. So like you're saying, it's not just about, you know, whether we build an airport or we have a road, but it's about how people are doing, you know, within themselves. So